closer to half an hour. And when they came back, they granted leave to appeal on the grounds that Julian will be discriminated against and excluded from constitutional protections under the First Amendment. The judges obviously saw the problem here, that the United States is applying its secrecy laws into this country. It's applying its secrecy laws internationally, and yet saying at the same time that if you're not a U.S. citizen and if you're abroad, then you won't have access to constitutional protections. And the judges were deeply disturbed by this, I would say, and allowed the leave to appeal. While I was speaking to Julian, a guard knocked on the door, and I could hear the guard saying, "Oh, congratulations today, and it's time to go to exercise." And so our conversation came to an end. But thankfully, it meant that today he was able to go out into the yard and enjoy the sunshine we have today. He was obviously relieved. He hadn't slept all night, and he's under enormous pressure. It's hard for all of us, but just imagine what it's like for Julian, who has been in Belmarsh for over 5 years, and who has had to endure this grueling process from inside his cell and isolated from everyone and from a distance. So it's a very good sign today. I think the U.S. administration should take this as a moment to drop the case and to just put an end to it, to distance itself from this terrible prosecution, which this administration did not initiate and should have put an end to already.
Okay, please raise your hands if you have any questions.
Mohammed Al-Mazi, I'm here reporting on behalf of the dissenter. Can I clarify, first question, what I heard the judge say, Dame Victoria Sharp, was that grounds 4 and 5 can be appealed in relation to all of the counts on the second superseding indictment. So first question is, did I get that correctly? Did she say they can be appealed in relation to all of the counts? Yes?
That's what I heard as well, but I want to wait for the written judgment.
So the second follow-up question to that would be, could perhaps Barry Pollard could explain the implications of that, because their original position 2 months ago was that they thought those two grounds might be arguable, but only in relation to 3 of the charges, because they said only 3 of the charges related to journalism. And now, since the evidence from Professor Grimm, who used to be a federal judge, was presented, and Professor Grimm said actually the First Amendment would apply to all of them, it seems that they've now reversed their position. That would appear to be quite significant, right?
It's not clear to me from the earlier order of the court whether the court had made up its mind whether this challenge related just to 3 of the counts that were directly related to publication or related to all of the counts. We certainly believed that the First Amendment issues relate to all of the counts, and that's what the UK lawyers argued on behalf of Julian this morning. The United States government argued to the contrary, that at most these issues only relate to 3 of the counts. The court squarely rejected that proposition and is going to hear the appeal with respect to all of the charges.
So they're going to hear in relation to all of them?
That is my understanding. The U.S. tried to confine it to just 3 of the Espionage Act counts, and at least from what the justices said today in court, they rejected that argument and are going to hear the appeal on all of the charges.
process next, what happens next. And also, one thing I didn't understand was both sides being ordered to go away and collaborate on an order. What was that all about? And could you explain that for me, Rose, please?
Anybody?
Well, I think on Friday, the 24th, which is the parties are going to have communicated to the court their availabilities and so on. And from there, we can expect a hearing to be listed sometime in the future.
Well, what was the court order that they're supposed to agree to?
Just the availabilities and the next steps and so on, the timings.
Do you not also tell Norway, wouldn't it be logical that he is now immediately released in waiting for the next round of appeal?
Well, I would assume it is a logical yes. Now he's been granted appeal, and under all normal circumstances, he should be allowed out on bail if that was the question. But I don't know where the lawyers are with that request.
Could you step up to the mic so you're answering the questions, please?
Hi, Ben from Guardian. One for Stella. Stella, I think you mentioned earlier that Joe Biden was running out of time to do the right thing. Could you expand on that? Is that a reference to the impending US presidential election? Is that a sort of an implicit fear that Donald Trump would do something different?
Well, I think it's undeniable. Everyone in this room understands that the political configuration in the United States will, basically determines Julian's freedom or imprisonment. And we don't know what will happen. We know that this administration has had a different, let's say that during the Trump administration there was much more enthusiasm, including in the way that administration talked about this prosecution. And so as time has gone by, Julian has been in prison for over 5 years now, as this extradition process has progressed. And the right thing to do from the Biden administration would have been to abandon this case from day one. There should have been a review of this case. It should have been top priority, and in fact one of the prosecutors who had been working on this case during the Trump administration, I think it was Willinger, or I don't know how you pronounce his name, he went into private practice right at the end of the Trump administration and said, well, I expect the Biden administration will probably review this case and might reach a different conclusion. Well, that should have happened from day one. But better late than never, and I think the decision today should send a signal to the Biden administration to look very carefully at this case, which over 40 U.S. law professors have written to the administration and said that this case is an existential threat to the First Amendment, and that should be taken very seriously. And what is the point in pursuing this at this stage? It is just harm to everyone, especially to Julian and to our family. But the harm is also affects protections and long-standing protections that have been intact for hundreds of years in the United States and that are now at grave risk of being fundamentally undermined. One could argue that this indictment already, just the fact of the indictment, has already very gravely undermined it, but they shouldn't take it any further, and they should just drop it. The only thing that really could somehow go some way to mending the harm that has already been done is to drop the case.
Catherine is from the ABC here. How are negotiations going for a diplomatic solution, and does today's outcome make that more likely?
Well, we know from the Australian government's pronouncements over the years and more and more intensely over time that they have put their position to the United States that Julian should be freed, and on Valentine's Day this year, they also got the backing of 2/3 of the Australian Parliament. The mandate of the Australian government is very clear, and Julian has enormous support in Australia. And so over time, the Australian government has become more and more forceful and clear that this is what is expected. And of course, Australia is a very close partner to the United States, and I think it's really significant, Australia's support for Julian, because until this administration, until the Albanese administration, the Australian government was basically abandoned Julian and complicit in his persecution, just through their silence and facilitation of what was happening, of what was being done to him. And the shift from the Albanese government has, I think, has a decisive impact in the way and the viability of getting away with it, basically. You know, this is a political case, and the United States should abandon the case. And when Julian's home country is calling for his release, it makes all the difference in a case that is completely political. That being said, Julian's not free. He's not free, and he's been in prison for over 5 years, and the Albanese government has to push harder and secure his release. It's just whatever it takes, he needs to be free. And I think it's clear to everyone in this room and everyone who's been observing this that this has to come to an end. And of course, I'm very grateful to what the Australian government has done to date, but it needs to continue advocating for his release. I think with every development there is, with all the world support there is, the world leaders who have come out in Brazil and Mexico, but also Germany, the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, saying Julian should not be extradited. Every time there is a pronouncement like this, it strengthens Julian's case for freedom, and it strengthens Australia's ability to advocate for him.
Hi, I'm Ian Overton. I was the editor of the Bureau of Investigative Journalism that worked very closely with Wikileaks without stories. And I have two questions, but mainly for Barry. The first is there a potential that even if Julian isn't extradited, he could be tried in absentia and found guilty in the US? And secondly, if he is tried in absentia and found guilty, or is extradited and found guilty, what does that mean for those who work closely, like Christian, like myself, with Julian, in terms of us being, A, reputationally damaged by the US government saying we abided and worked with the criminal, and secondly, I've written to the US ambassador here in London asking for a reassurance that I wouldn't be arrested for having been the editor on the War Logs. What does that mean for journalists?
So under U.S. law, he cannot be tried in absentia. He cannot be tried in the United States unless the U.K. agrees to extradite him there, and that's why today's decision was so important. Hopefully, the U.K. will not extradite him to the United States. If the United States were ultimately to obtain extradition, and if, despite all of the reasons that you've heard why they should just drop the case, they decided that they wanted to proceed, it is a terrifying prospect, as far as I'm concerned, for journalists, not just in the United States, but all over the world. The notion that the United States can prosecute anyone anywhere on the planet who has the temerity to report on U.S. national security issues has a tremendous chilling effect on journalism. And the very fact that this prosecution has been brought and that Julian has spent 5 years in prison for doing his job and informing the world of very important, newsworthy information, including the fact that the United States has committed war crimes, that already has a tremendous chilling effect. And so I hope that the U.S. government will walk away from the prosecution. If they don't, I hope the High Court will not extradite him. It's not just for Julian and his family, who obviously are most immediately impacted. It's for journalists all over the world, and for us as citizens who depend on journalists to be informed about what the government is doing purportedly in our name.
One last question.
I would like to understand whether the new Home Secretary could reverse the extradition order, and if you think that that could be likely to happen under a new possible Labour administration.
The question is to whom? Well, I don't even know the answer to that. Well, to be honest, since I don't know the answer, I'm probably the best person to try to answer it. Technically, can the decision to extradite be reversed? I think that is so, but whether it's likely under a new administration, I am not entirely convinced. The possible future Prime Minister of this country had a direct sort of input into the process of this case in his previous life as Director of Public Prosecution. So I don't want to speculate on that, but we are seeing political changes in this country in the next year, in the United States in the next half year, and it creates uncertainty. And I just want to reiterate what has been said here before and what I've said, that the only solution that is just and logical is to end the case, to drop the case. And the signaling from today to the US is obviously in that direction.
I think just going to call that time now. Thank you all for coming. Hopefully you've got lots of content and your notepads are full. There will be opportunity for some short one-to-one interviews afterwards. So I asked, there's obviously a number of you here, and a combination of further commitments in the evening and us not having this room for forever. We asked that you sort of come to me if you'd like to speak with Stella. If you'd like to speak with any of the other members up on stage, please do just approach them directly in a nice, orderly and polite manner if we can. And there might be a possibility we might have to pull some interviews just because of the sheer number, and just ask for your understanding on that. But yeah, thank you all for coming, and just do please approach the various members if you'd like to speak to.
Thank you. Thank you.